Hi everyone, thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Source Smarter, Find and Hire Better the Right Candidates. My name is Megan Berry and I am on the marketing team here at Jazz. Before we get started with our presentation today, I just wanted to go through a few housekeeping items with everyone. First, we are definitely recording this webinar and we're going to make sure that everyone gets a copy of the slides and the recording after the webinar. We're also going to be accepting questions throughout, and we will take all of those at the end, and you can submit those in the chat box on your screen. And if you are really into social media, or we say something that you might kind of sort of like, feel free to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag SourceSmarter, and you can follow us at jazz.co. So with that out of the way, it is time to introduce our speakers for today. We're joined by Corey Berkey, the Director of HR here at Jazz. Corey's been with Jazz for a bit over a year now. He is a cellist and a new homeowner. So thank you for joining us, Corey. And you'll also hear me chiming in from time to time. My name is Megan, and if you heard us on our last webinar, you'll know that I'm a pretty new member of the Jazz team, having been here for just over a month. I've lived in Boston my whole life, and fun fact about me is I'm really excited to be a first-time auntie in January. So before I hand it off to Corey, I just wanted to give you all a look at what we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to start with the state of human resources and capital management, and then talk through how the workforce is changing in today's labor market. We'll get into how tech is impacting this and the considerations that you need to make when you're recruiting. And then we'll share some tips on how you can improve your sourcing strategy to find and hire the right candidates for your business. And of course, we'll end with some Q&A, so send those along whenever you think of one. So Corey, at this point, I will turn it over to you.
Thanks, Megan, and again, good afternoon, everybody. We have some information here that we're going to take you through to sort of help set the stage for how we're going to provide you with some tips to source some better candidates along the way. And where we're going to actually start today is taking a look at the evolution of the HR space as it's predicted to happen over about the next 3 to 4 years. And when we do that, we start by taking a look at 4 specific buckets. They're industry, workforce management, talent acquisition, and technology. And the interesting thing, and where Jazz comes into play with all of this, is that there's an overlay of a recruiting transformation that's taking place in both talent acquisition and technology. How businesses are going to be able to leverage technology for the talent acquisition process moving forward, a process that's becoming more and more robust as time goes on. So before we jump into the rest of the information and sort of unpack some of those things that I just said, we have a brief poll for everybody. So if you take a look at your screen, it should be popping up for you. And we'll give you a few seconds here to respond. But what we're looking to see is, how big is your HR department? And we hear a lot that businesses are focused on having an HR department of one, or a lot of times there's somebody who is only that HR department of one, and in the earlier stages even we see a lot of what we call at Jazz deputized HR folks. So we see the responses coming in. I'll give you a few more seconds to respond, but take just a few seconds please, and click the button that matches your company. All right. So we've gotten quite a few responses so far. To those of you who did that for us, thank you very much. There's going to be another poll coming here shortly, so just hang tight and be ready for that. It's coming up in a few minutes here. But when we take a look at the results and how departments are structured, we can see that actually there's quite a few folks on the call with larger departments, but we still do see a good presence of nobody in HR or just one person in HR. But it's great to see these types of numbers come back. So again, thank you for your participation in that. As we look forward and see the evolution of HR, a lot of what's expected to happen is an overall reduction in internal HR headcount, and that's going to be a result of HR outsourcing activities increasing. There's a couple of things that are really motivating that. We're going to see that a lot of the industry is going to make a move from generalist to specialist. By no means am I saying that there will not be a continued need for generalists, but you'll see businesses looking to grow the HR side of their team with very special focuses on a couple of roles. Teams are going to focus on their core competencies. You see people say aces in the right places, but this is really getting back to sticking to what you do best and contracting others for the rest of that work. Businesses are going to find a newfound focus on cost containment, meaning that businesses are going to be more willing to adapt those software solutions that come in, and these solutions will be paid for instead of salaries in some cases, automating some of the more tactical tasks within HR. And especially with, we all know, live and breathe the ACA requirements and a lot of other compliance pressure that's being pushed into the HR world today. I know a lot of my peers here in the Pittsburgh area that are HR departments of one or few, they're spending a lot of time gearing up for the FLSA changes that are taking place at the end of the year. So we see all of these greater compliance pressures pushing on the market. Businesses are going to look to mitigate that risk through the outsourcing of some of their activities. So what that means is that the HR teams will become a little bit leaner, a little bit figuratively meaner anyway, and the HR contributions to the business are going to move from the tactical side of the spectrum into the more strategic side of the spectrum. And HR absolutely should have a seat at the table. HR should absolutely be providing more strategic contributions to the overall growth and trajectory of the business. And as we sort of progress through time, we'll see that those tactical things are going to be outsourced, not even necessarily outsourced to people, but there will be software solutions that continue to enter the market that help automate and streamline a lot of the HR functions. As teams transition to this leaner configuration, generalists will still need to be at the helm or somebody with experience, broad spectrum in the HR world, but specialist support will come into play quite frequently. HR's value then is rooted in their strategic guidance and their efforts to help optimize the workforce. And we're going to see HR professionals across the industry sort of banging their fist on the table saying, I need analytics, I need metrics. And HR decisions are going to be leveraging data much more in the future than they have before. So the Workforce Reinvented and optimization of that workforce has a couple of key things that come into play, and we're also going to talk a little bit about a talent shortage that if you're not feeling today as an HR professional, I would be willing to bet in the next 6 to 12 months, the next time you have a requisition come open, you'll feel that shortage. The workforce is being reinvented, and what we mean by that is because businesses are much more focused on what we alluded to before with aces in the right places, or making sure that you've got the best possible players in the right place for that player. Basically, making sure that we are efficiently using human capital. Businesses are going to be focused on redeployment and lateral moves within the organization, and in some cases, reorganization to help align the workforce and their strengths with the overall initiative of the businesses. And that also means that as businesses grow, they're going to be doing so selectively. You're going to be looking for many different skills to be fulfilled, skill gaps rather, to be fulfilled by incoming new hires to your organization. People who not only solve one problem, but who can have the potential to solve many as they evolve as members of your team. We also see some pressures on the workforce because millennials, for the first time, you can see here in 2015, millennials had the greatest share of the U.S. labor force, and that is the first time that that has happened. This is resulting in a lot shorter of a stint, and we have some material on our website that talks about the gig employee. And what we mean by that is represented by some stats that we have here from 2012, where the average worker who was maybe looking to be in their role or working for that company for about 4.5 years was outweighed by millennials who typically expect to spend less than 3 years in their current role or with their current company. This is going to ultimately push for global expansion of workforce in a lot of different ways, because labor is going to become more scarce here domestically, but also a lot of people are going to be focusing on specialized skills here, and this is going to create the entrance, a pathway for remote management to become an even more important facet of how we are working as a culture. The workforce transformation is also making it Megan mentioned at the beginning of the call, newfound homeowner here, and it's interesting because when we purchased our home, it was very much a seller's market. It's very much an employee's market for a lot of different roles today, especially as you become more technical. So the employer and employee match is going to be more critical now than ever before. The culture of your workplace matters, and you'll see how this impacts the caliber of candidates you're able to source. Because remember, there are sources out there for candidates to get an inside look at your company before they even click that apply button now. That's technology and capability that 15 years ago was never there. So things that we're doing internally for cultural enhancement are very important. Also, being a flexible employer who provides opportunity for advancement is going to get even more attention. People are going to be looking for roles where they can come in and quickly climb the ladder. Also arguably a subset of what a lot of people refer to as the millennial mentality. But when we talk about recruiting in a new area and sourcing these candidates, we see that recruiting is actually going to fall more between human resources and marketing than it ever has before. As an employer, when you are sourcing candidates, you need to be prepared to answer tough questions. Questions like, why should you work for me? Or the candidate would ask you, why should I work for you? You have to be able to answer that and give the candidate a succinct response that encapsulates everything that it means to be an employee of your company. You have to be able to provide candidates with a compelling story. Why do they want to join your team? Where is your company going? Where are your products going? And how are you working to change the world or the market you serve? And because of that, a lot of the messaging that HR delivers is going to feel a lot more like marketing than it ever has before. All of this combined together with a talent shortage is going to make the recruiting market a lot more competitive. And this means that you have to be focused on sourcing those candidates that you're looking for and finding the most direct path to them. We're going to unbox that here in a minute. But the talent shortage that's on the horizon is due to a lack of confidence in, with some respects, the education system. It's going to create a more competitive nature amongst employers, which is going to mean that talent is going to get snatched off the market much more quickly than it has before. Time is really going to be of the essence. Getting to that candidate as soon as they pick their head up is going to be key. We talked a little bit about the transition to global growth, but another factor that's going to impact the way that businesses grow are where we're sourcing skilled and unskilled labor, where we're able to do that at a reduced cost even within the U.S. I'm not talking about offshoring. I'm talking about what is the labor cost of having part of your support team or your success team in Austin versus in San Francisco versus in Pittsburgh versus in Boston. All of these things are going to come together and really help drive a lot of the decision making that goes on. And lastly, and we even see this here, training is going to become a refocused initiative. Some businesses probably have lost sight of their training or have not refreshed their training in a long time, but a lot of businesses are going to be spending time breathing new air into their training programs because they're going to be focused on training young talent for advancement. If you don't begin that process early, it's going to become more and more of a struggle. And that's why we're going to see shifts to digital learning and utilizing an LMS to deliver information. And the reason that this even pertains to sourcing is because I would say, I do a lot of the interviewing and sourcing here at Jazz. And I would say that on more than 70% of those phone calls, one of the questions I'm asked is, what is training like, or what is onboarding like, or what would my first week or some time frame thereof be like? And people want to know that because they want to know what to expect, and they also want to be prepared for what you can provide. Sort of like gone are the days where you bring somebody into the company and they spend their first hour cleaning their own new office or getting things set up. People want to come in and hit the ground running. So we look at how technology impacts all of this and how we are able to leverage technology to our advantage. And there are really four main areas that come to light: cost containment, integration, accessibility, and the fact that, as we mentioned, data and analytics are going to become king in the HR space. So cost containment is pretty straightforward, kind of a no-brainer. Businesses are always worried about that bottom line. And so we're looking for ways to efficiently manage costs. We're looking for savings by migrating from hosted solutions into the cloud. We're looking to eliminate legacy systems. Not necessarily that the newest is the best, but making sure that you are being well-informed purchasers as you make these types of purchase decisions, making sure that the product or solution you're purchasing accurately fits the needs of your business. And lastly, you'll see that reporting or some sort of analytical bolt-on tool is going to become a lot more common in the HR space. Even if you take a look at the solutions that Jazz has to offer, or the things that the HCM that we use in-house has to offer, the reporting and the analytics behind the data of our people is becoming a lot more robust so that we can use it intelligently to run the business. Integration is also going to be very important because unified employee data is going to be the name of the game. Having one common data repository so that you can see your candidates' information or your employees' information is going to be a way for you to make actionable decisions. Time efficiency obviously comes from this because you can do sort of one-stop shopping as you're looking for information on how job postings are performing, or how a particular source is doing, or even how different recruiters are performing compared to one another. The consistent user experience is going to be a key cornerstone for what businesses look for. And all of this is sort of coupled together with the fact that you never see limits on the amount of data that you can store. You can store an infinite amount of information. And all of that really helps to compile a really great narrative on what your workforce looks like and how people are being leveraged to further the business. We also see this term coming out now, contextual computing, and I really like what it stands for. Cross-device functionality. I should have the same experience on my MacBook that I do on my iPhone, that I do on my iPad, and that should be universal across a lot of different platforms. Mobile accessibility is going to become a prominent differentiator for these solutions as you continue to evaluate them. And teams are going to be looking to collaborate together. The sourcing process, the selection process is no longer a one decision maker. Many people are coming together to make these decisions in a collaborative environment. And you need to be able to source effectively and pull this data together so that you can more effectively utilize your time and resources moving forward. As businesses move towards contextual computing, the greater adoption that comes from that results in valuable and arguably more actionable data. So we see the talk of data and analytics coming up. How does that apply to sourcing? Great question. I'm a big believer that you should know where every one of your candidates first saw the job posting or how they heard about it. These types of data points will really help shape the recruiting campaigns that you'll focus on as you continue to grow teams. And you hear that that recruiting campaign, I mean, even there marketing is pulling into what we're doing here. And HR will be responsible for data capture, analysis, and then taking action on that data. So as we move forward here and we look to the next part of our presentation, one more little poll here. How many of you use technology to manage your recruiting process? Whether or not you are actively involved in that as an HR professional, or maybe you're a hiring manager, just let us know. Is technology something that you are using? Okay. We're going to put the results up here so that you can take a look at this. One of the questions that just popped up, what type of technology are you speaking of? So that's a great question. Let's say anything that is not what I would consider like inbox recruiting. So email, don't consider that technology for this purpose. But moreover, things like an applicant tracker, some sort of candidate CRM, something like that. So that was a great question. Thank you for asking that. Okay. I'm going to put some results up here so that we can see what the audience has to say. So more than 80% have some sort of technological solution at play. That's a great number, and we can see, I'm sure that number is going to continue to rise over time just because of the advancements that are taking place inside of the HCM space. So excellent numbers here, and it really does help tell a story. So as we look towards recruiting considerations, there are really three things that come from all of this and really how we're sourcing candidates. We have to understand the workforce. How do millennials want to be recruited? Where are they looking for these opportunities? And how do you attract their attention, even if that means passively sourcing and getting a millennial to pick their head up? Having measurable criteria and analytics also becomes key. You have to understand where these candidates are coming from and how you can pursue them more efficiently in the future. And then properly using the resources that you have available. So what technology resources do you have? What people resources do you have on board to help with the selection process? And how much collaboration are you able to sort of pull together to make for a meaningful selection or recruiting process? All of these will lead to better talent acquisition. So as we really get into the meat of this presentation and talking about sourcing smarter, we've got some tips we want to share for you. Some of this is industry, some of this is just our own best practices. And the first one really is start before you're ready. This seems pretty straightforward, and even though I myself try to live by this, I find myself maybe 1 out of 3 open recs, I missed the boat on this for one reason or another. Really keeping job descriptions up to date and anticipating hiring needs, it really becomes key as you look to grow your organization. Having that job description gives you an excellent foundation to really make sure you can hit the ground running. You're able to write a compelling job post because you know exactly what the details look like for that particular role. But more importantly, I would say keep your job descriptions up to date, but always make sure that you're using a new job rec or a new opening as an opportunity to refresh and evaluate some of those characteristics for the role, really to help make sure that the person that you are actually looking for is the person that you're advertising for or the person that you're trying to attract. You also want to make sure that you get in front of candidates. Advertise where they're known to look. You almost have to think about this sort of twofold. Is there an industry-specific factor that comes into play on this? There are several engineering-specific job boards, for instance, or executive or C-level job boards for folks that fit into those categories where they can go to look for jobs that are specifically tailored for people that share a common set of skills or characteristics. That's one really important factor. But another one that creeps up a lot of times is actually the geography of where you are. When we were hiring in Boston, we just did a hiring spree on the sales side of the business. We were hiring just outside of Boston in Waltham, actually where Megan's office is. And throughout the course of that, you'd see, if you saw my job postings popping up, if it was a Massachusetts-based role, I was advertising a little bit heavier on Sites like Glassdoor, for instance, is where we had some spend. But if it was a role that was here in Pittsburgh, I would probably shift my focus a little bit more to Indeed, because I know that the labor market in those specific areas tend to gravitate towards those particular job boards, and really being able to see the data behind where you're having the most success hiring helps you shape the way that you're spending your sourcing dollars moving forward. I mean, I know that it is a constant conversation anytime there's a job opening. If we're going to spend for sourcing, where do we spend? Is it something that we would, for whatever reason, bring an outside recruiter in to help with? Or is it something that we would in some cases not even have to pay to post, because we can gain so much organic attention just from people hitting our job boards or searching or being recommended for jobs through various platforms. So being able to understand for your business and your industry where these candidates are looking is really, really important. And lastly, for starting before you're ready, have that strategy outlined. Know directionally where you want to post jobs. Know directionally where you want to source candidates from. Even if you're sourcing passive candidates, know what companies have candidates that would make a great fit for your organization. Things like that can really, really help you get the upper hand, so that as soon as a job requisition is open, you know where you're pulling these candidates from, and you know where to sort of plant the seeds and grow them into a great candidate pool. So just staying in front of the entire process is key. Secondly, source from the inside out. Internal referral programs are going to gain in popularity. We have an internal referral program here at Jazz, and I know a lot of my colleagues in the HR industry have these in place in their own businesses. It is actually, compared to having an outside recruiter help you, a very low-cost alternative, and does generally yield some great candidates. Now, there have to be guidelines around that. You want to make sure that it's structured correctly. You want to make sure sort of like the rules of engagement are clear. But you need to make sure that you're offering a meaningful incentive to these people, your team that knows who in the community might be looking for jobs, their friends or their network connections. Because doing this internal referral program is based off of some pretty simple logic. Your objective is always going to be to hire the best person for the role. If you're hiring top caliber salespeople, for instance, or very high caliber marketers, logic would stand to say they're going to know really, really talented marketers or other really, really high caliber sales folks. And so making sure that you focus on that and leverage your team to help you build sort of like a winning organization is an easy way. But don't ever lose sight of employee engagement during this process. I mean, employee engagement is a really hot buzz term right now, and I would encourage everybody to make sure that it is always at the front of your attention. Employee engagement really helps augment the efforts of an internal referral plan. Happy, engaged employees obviously translate into higher caliber referrals. Another interesting area to focus your recruiting efforts is social. And we're actually, as you all know, lucky enough to have Megan on the line with us today. And who better to talk about social than a true born marketer. So Megan, do you want to spend a few minutes here talking about social, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Corey. So at Jazz, we actually the marketing team as a whole works really closely with Corey to make sure that we're utilizing social media to help his recruiting efforts. So not only does this help from an advertising and applicant quantity perspective, but it's actually really important to manage social from an employer branding perspective as well. It's important to keep in mind that not every channel is going to be the best channel for your business or for your industry, but making sure that you have a presence and are active are the first steps to make it successful. And in a few minutes, I'm going to share a link with you in the chat box. Don't want to multitask too much. I'll stumble over my words. But this link will help you decide which social channels are actually best for your business. So that should be really helpful if you guys don't have a social strategy yet. But the great thing about social is it allows you to target specific types of groups and lets candidates engage with your culture. So when you start to use social recruiting, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. Number one is to make sure that it's part of your strategy. Doing it once in a while or when you remember or if somebody asks to kind of be reactive, it's not going to give you the same lift as it will if it's ingrained in your strategy and it's always in the back of your mind and you know that it's something you need to be working on. I mentioned this just a second ago, but also differentiating your strategy by platform. Typically, Twitter tactics are not going to work on Facebook, and Snapchat tactics are absolutely not going to work on LinkedIn. So making sure that you not just have a social strategy, but you have a strategy per channel. We also want to help make the candidate decision to work for you an easy one. So again, this brings us back to employer branding. It's important, obviously, that you want to show the pictures of the dogs you allow in the office or the baby showers that you're hosting for a colleague, but they also want to see the useful information. So things like how their career can evolve there, sharing other sentiments about the brand, taking kind of a play out of that internal sourcing playbook. So getting your employees on video talking about how much they love working there is always a great way to lift that. And finally, making messages personal and direct. So once you've made contact with a potential candidate on social, making sure that your messages aren't generic because people really can tell if they're generic or not. How many times have you followed someone on Twitter to get the generic direct message that says, great to connect with you, follow me here and we'll be in touch soon. Everyone knows those are auto-generated, so it's important to have that personal and direct connection so that you're actually using this to your benefit and to theirs, really. So social recruiting really can have a greater reward than I think a lot of people give it credit for. But if you take away one thing from this, it's making sure that it's part of your strategy rather than a one-off thought for the best result that you could get.
Thanks, Megan. And absolutely true how Megan opened that section up. I mean, absolutely true that I am constantly working with our marketing team here on the social side. And if you are in the HR seat, absolutely make sure that you are communicating and working with your marketers, because this staffing and organizational development is key to everybody within the organization. So those were some great points. Tip number 4 here, though, consider the non-monetary offerings. Salary is important, and I think salary is actually where one of my pet peeves can creep up in the selection process, because I usually ask people pretty directly for most roles, what are you looking for? Where do you need to be to make a move? And when people write negotiable, I just kind of have to think a little bit. You'd be surprised how much the salary negotiation part of sourcing and selection have transformed in the last, even 5 years really. Cash is not as king as it once was. Not to say that it's not important. The $30,000 a year CFO candidates, you're probably going to get what you pay for. But a lot of job seekers now are beyond the cash side of things, primarily because, as we talked about earlier, that the workforce is aging and creating a little bit more of an opportunity for millennials to jump into senior openings. As people are moving around and as you're interviewing candidates, if you have somebody who's really good, the thing that I like to try and keep in the back of my mind is, if I don't stretch and try and pull out all of the stops on the cash side, somebody else will, and then I'm going to be at risk with this candidate. But the best way to differentiate yourself, besides really making sure that you're competitive on the cash side, are making sure that you've got some perks and incentives. It doesn't have to be cell phone discounts. It doesn't have to be like beer cart Fridays or anything crazy like that, but things that help engage your workforce, things that help create some work-life balance, like flexible arrangements or the opportunity to work from home. As Megan alluded to on the social side, at Jazz, we're a pet-friendly workplace. We actually have one of our customer success folks. Lila is bringing her dog Tayo into the office tomorrow, and Tayo always gets a great reception whenever she comes into the office. But even if you're in a more metropolitan area, transportation benefits are a hot thing to offer. People can spend a small fortune on, bus passes or parking passes or taxis or Ubers, and being able to provide that transportation benefit is sort of one of the unsung, very low cost in most cases to the business unsung heroes that you can consider. With the millennial workforce really taking shape, the tuition assistance has also gotten a lot of buzz. And even something like child care programs, or maybe you can't budget for the child care side of things. Maybe you offer an FSA instead, and yeah, there's a little expense with that, but things like that where you're able to help enable employees to make budget-conscious decisions and provide provide that little extra incentive or perk to a candidate really goes a long way for telling folks what it means to be a part of your organization. And Megan's going to talk a little bit here about workforce demographics too, which is also important on the non-monetary side of the fence.
Yeah, absolutely. They're so important, and I feel like a lot of what I've come in here to tell everyone today is, about making sure that you're considering demographics on social, considering demographics when putting together benefits packages. So, it goes without saying, depending on the generations that you have in your workforce, they're going to have different needs. Corey mentioned earlier, millennials are taking over the workforce, and as a very proud millennial, we are absolutely concerned about different things than the baby boomers, for instance. Like Corey mentioned, we are more concerned about student loans and tuition payments. I've been out of school now for 7 years, and I'm going to be paying my student loans for probably the next 20. Boomers are looking more into retirement funds and what options they have there, although admittedly us millennials really should be worrying about that as well. But we're also staying in our jobs for a shorter period of time, making it more important than ever that you're putting together benefits and offerings that are attractive to them to keep them there longer. A good way to find out what employees want is really just to ask them. You don't want to put that burden on yourself with everything else that, as an HR person you have going on, to test out program after program after program and wonder why they're not sticking. Ask employees what they want, what's important to them, and then you'll have ideas for programs that have a better chance of sticking with everyone in your workforce regardless of those generational differences. A few things that Jazz does, for instance, are things like bring your dog to work day that Corey just mentioned. We have very flexible work arrangements. I'm actually conducting this webinar from my apartment right now. And we do other fun activities away from the desk, away from the computer, like a team lunch out of the office or a post-work team building event. And something else really fun, we have a beer exchange on a monthly basis that is actually led by someone on our executive team. So that shows that these kinds of initiatives can and probably should be coming from the top down. So those are just a few examples of what we do here at Jazz. Obviously, you have to take into consideration the culture that your company has as well. But those are some ways that salary doesn't really have to play into the sourcing process.
Thanks, Megan. And the last tip that we have to offer here on sourcing candidates and making sure that you're looking in the right places really comes down to casting a wide net. Make sure that you're using some sort of tool or track your successes in various sources, but try to find a tool or a solution that allows you to post everywhere at once. If you're posting on the free side of Indeed and you're posting on the, you're making posts on like LinkedIn and Glassdoor and all of these other job boards, in a lot of cases there are solutions out there, of course Jazz being one of them, that lets you make those posts all in one step. You can find different solutions that help you syndicate out, and that will also ultimately help in being able to track these sort of leads and make sure that you're gathering this actionable data. Get out of your inbox too, folks. I mean, if you are posting jobs and candidates are expressing interest by emailing or paper mailing their resume to you, do everything you can to try and find a way to keep everything digital, or even there are different ways to to use this sort of technology to get collaboration rolling within the hiring process. So make sure that you're adapting your own recruiting practices to get away from the inbox or away from the mailbox, and get these practices in place that allow you to standardize the process. And lastly, as we mentioned, don't forget about that social media. It's out there, and it can certainly help quite a bit. So don't be afraid to use that. And if you are the HR person or the deputized HR person or the recruiter, for that social stuff, don't be afraid to step up to the marketing team and say, hey, I need some help with this, or what are your thoughts on this? Because they're a great resource that you probably have just down the hallway or sitting behind you that can help make this process a lot more streamlined for you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Corey. I don't think that everyone is able to click on this slide where the hyperlinks are, but we're going to be sending a copy of the deck out and the recording with all this information. But there are a couple of more resources here that we just wanted to share with you. We have another upcoming webinar talking about how you can use Jazz to help build better candidate relationships. So we'll send this out. You can feel free to register for that as well. And we have some other additional resources on our blog. But thank you to everyone for joining us today, and for Corey for being here. That was a ton of information. If you have questions, please feel free to start sending them to the chat box. We've had a couple already. So Corey, I'm just going to start firing them off here. When paying for job postings, how do you determine where to post the job?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say in a lot of cases you have to see if you can find any sort of history, or maybe even if you're new to the company, or maybe you just don't have the data because you didn't have a solution in place. Pull your list of employees, go talk to those team members, ask them where they learned about the opportunity. Hopefully they're saying things like we saw it on Indeed, or it popped up as a recommended job on LinkedIn. That's the best place to really start if you have no data to go off of. Another thing that you can do is really look back through, if you are using an automated system, in a lot of cases there's some kind of technical indication in the link that they use to apply. Jazz does a lot of that automation side for me, which is great, so that I can see where my candidates are coming from. Obviously we use our own solution, but if there's any sort of feedback that you can capture from your team, or even networking with your colleagues to see where they're getting the most success. The biggest pitfall here though is if you're sort of, for lack of a better term, unsure where you're headed as far as sourcing and where to pull these candidates from, or where to post and use your resources, don't overlook the industry characteristics of your business. So if you are working with maybe an HR colleague or connection that you have whose business is in engineering, but your business is largely rooted in hospitality, you're going to have to obviously understand that the industry is going to have a bearing on where you post. You're going to need to diversify and probably not pursue everything that your colleague does. Just because the candidates for those different types of companies are going to be searching in different places. So absolutely making sure that you're using the team that you have, or if you have any of this historical data that you can go back and pull from is going to be key. And the least preferred but most obvious solution, if all else fails, you might have to take a few job recs and do some trial and error. Effectively manage the spend on it, but you may end up having to put a couple of lines in the water and see where you get the most bites, and then shape your future strategy around sourcing candidates based off of the results that you get.
Great, thank you, Corey. The next question that came in, I will take a stab at. The question is it okay for me to ask employees to share open jobs through their channels? I absolutely 100% think it's okay to ask, and I would encourage you to do so. I would just, you're asking. You're not requiring it. You're not telling them to do it. But asking is absolutely okay. They will decide whether or not that's something that they're comfortable doing. And it also doesn't hurt to kind of sweeten that deal a little bit too. If you're using an employer referral program, there are a lot of companies that do, you get a bonus if that person gets signed on and stays in 3 months, 6 months. So that will help encourage employees to do that. But yes, I absolutely think it is fine to ask employees, and they can decide from there if they're comfortable to do that or not. So I hope that answers your question. Corey, another question we have, how do I make sure referral programs are not taken advantage of? So I didn't just answer that, but I kind of just led you into that.
Yeah, that was a good question as well. I think that really thinking through the process and what kind of procedures are going to be in place. I mean, for instance, if you peel back the curtain and look and see what we do at Jazz, obviously hiring managers, executive team, and team leaders are not eligible to participate in this because it's incumbent upon all of us to help make sure that we're sourcing the right candidates and that we're making the right hiring decisions. So that's what our salaries are for. That's what we pay our team for. But our individual contributors, they're the ones that can really take advantage of this. And it has to be simple things like something that's unorthodox that we do that a lot of people, whenever I tell them this, they kind of like blink twice at me and give me, sort of like the spaced outlook, is we actually pay part of the incentive out on the referred employee's first day. So we put a referral bonus amount in front of every job requisition that's open. If you refer somebody that's your network and either they indicate that you referred them or you let us know before they apply that you're referring them and they get selected, as soon as they start working for Jazz, you get a little chunk of change to help pad your wallet a little bit. But then you get the rest of it about 90 days after they've started. So as long as both the team member that referred and the team member that was referred are active in 90 days, then there's a little bit of a bigger cash payout that goes to the person who made the referral. And that does a couple of things for us. One, it helps make sure that candidates have the longevity that we're looking for because over time the referral plan is fairly new at Jazz. So over time we'll extend that a little bit longer or put a third payout in there maybe after 6 months. But this way we're really helping to make sure that the candidates that are referred to us by our team are really high quality. And frankly, I'm always surprised to hear whenever somebody refers a person who doesn't pan out, because in a lot of cases, what better opportunity to make sure that you're enjoying your work than helping to play a role in deciding who you work with. So there's a lot of non-monetary incentive for folks to participate in that as well. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that helped to answer that question.
Great, thank you. Last question that we have time for today. And Corey, I'll let you answer this one as well, but how do you find which job boards are most popular in your geographical area?
Sure. So great question. I think that one is going to have to be a result of kind of like the first item that we talked about there, making sure that you know where your candidates to date have come from, if not going out to get the information from your recently hired folks. But also making sure that as you move forward, you're seeing where you're getting the most traction. From my own experience, like I said, in hiring in Pittsburgh, I use a lot of Indeed and LinkedIn. Boston is usually LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and in some cases Monster Career Builder in some different scenarios. San Francisco, the Bay Area, I've had the most success for whatever reason with Glassdoor posts. But all of that sort of comes from trial and error and really seeing what works best and talking to people, seeing where they saw our jobs and asking where my colleagues are advertising as well. I mean, that's sort of like knowledge that has been built up over time. So I would definitely recommend doing that, or even talking with the other leaders inside of your own organization to see what information they might have. Because keep in mind, if I was going to hire an engineer in Pittsburgh, in Boston, or in San Francisco, there are some pretty specific engineering job boards that I would focus on regardless of geography. So you might sort of have a silver bullet like that you can use too. So don't let those fall by the wayside either.
Great, thank you. The last request that we had come in was actually for Corey to play her cello for a little while, but I don't think we have time for that today. Maybe next time, but thank you everyone on the line. Yes, good. Thank you, everyone on the line. Thank you for joining us and for your questions. There were a couple we didn't get to. We will follow up with you on those answers as soon as we can. We'll send the slides and recording out later this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning, so be on the lookout for that. And I hope you all have a great day. Thanks so much.